Hi everyone, I had the craziest experience with my wife. I got married to a greedy, selfish woman with no care for anyone but herself. Yes, Reddit. I got married to a gold digger. The most interesting part is that I don't even have gold. I know you're wondering, which gold did she dig? You know that feeling of confusion and excitement at the same time? That's exactly what I feel right now because my wife got exactly what she deserved. She thought she could bite more than she could chew and go scot-free. My wife believed she could eat her cake and have it back. I've always been taught to be content with what I have, so I have lived my life in a simple way. I have never desired things that could cost me dearly. My wife is not like me. She got greedy and decided to cheat on me because she thought the grass was greener somewhere else. Newsflash. She got the karma she deserved. She even tried to get me back after things went bad for her and her partner. Reddit, do you think I'll be that stupid? There is no excuse for cheating on your partner and making a fool out of them. I can't wait to tell you all what happened. But before that, I'll need to let you all know how I got married to my wife. Our marriage was not planned at all. In fact, I got married to her to save her from being married off to an old man. My wife, F37, and I, M40, have known each other for over 30 years now. Yes, I'm serious. I have known my wife for 30 good years. She's almost like a part of me. I mean, if you know someone for more than half your life, you'll get attached to them. 3 decades. My wife did not even think about the 3 decades we have known each other. That's a lot of time. 30 years is a very long time to just be thrown away like that. I know you all are wondering how it's possible that we've known each other for 30 years. My wife and I are from Lagos State, Nigeria. I lived in a town named Surulere in Lagos. I was 10 years old before my wife and her family moved to my neighborhood in Surulere. One thing about us Nigerians is that we know how to live like a community. You can have a whole neighborhood with over 60 residents living like they are distant relatives. I come from a family that struggled to put food on the table for as long as I could remember. My wife, on the other hand, was just 7 years old when she moved there. She was practically a baby, lol. Rumors. In a small neighborhood, rumors are bound to fly around, and that's exactly how I knew why my wife and her family moved to Surulere. My mom heard from her friend, that's how fast gossip travels, that the family that moved to our neighborhood recently were very rich before. I still remember how my mom and dad sat in our small living room and discussed the new family. My mom told my dad that the new family lived in a better house before. Their father worked in a bank before he suddenly lost his job and got broke. That's why they ended up moving to Surulere. They had gone from grace to grass. That's the worst kind of setback ever. 1 year later, my wife and I started attending the primary school, elementary school. I attended. I started talking to her because I knew she was my neighbor, and I wanted to make her feel comfortable in the new environment. To be honest, guys, I am a very nice person, and that's the only reason I tried getting my wife out of her shell. After 1 more year, my wife got used to Surulere and her new school. My wife and I were just cordial. We were not friends at all. I knew her as my neighbor, and that was all. Years passed by, and we slowly started playing together and going to school together. We became friends, and even our families became close. My wife always told me she wanted to make it big in life and become rich. Years later, we finished our primary, elementary, and secondary high school education. That's where all the problems began. My family told me I could not go to the university, college, so I had to go learn a trade or start farming to earn money. I was fine with it at first, but as time went on, I was not okay with that. I started working as a mechanic and earned some money to send myself to university. My parents were against it at first, but as time went on, they allowed me to go. My wife, on the other hand, was told there was no money to send her to college. For women, it was harder to further your studies because after school, marriage was your next focus. One day, my wife ran to the mechanic shop I worked for back then with tears in her eyes. Dear Reddit readers, when I say she had tears in her eyes, I mean it. She cried her eyes out. I remember being so shocked and confused. I did not know what to do about the situation, so I held her hand and tried to calm her down. She fell to her knees and told me she wanted to run away. I was shocked. Yes, I was very shocked. I asked her why she wanted to run away, and she told me her family was planning to marry her off to a stranger. I got very angry because I knew that one thing she always told me she never wanted to do was get married to a man she did not like. She always told me of her dreams of going to a college, and each time I told her how impossible it was. They had a beautiful daughter that was 23 years old. She was old enough to get married to a rich man. They did not care if he was old or not. After making my wife calm down, I told her to go back to her house and get some sleep. She told me she was not sleepy, but I did not listen to her. I escorted her back home, then went back to my place of work. After work that day, I could not sleep at all. The plan I had in mind back then had to be the most stupid, dangerous thing I'd ever come up with. Even my siblings laughed at me when I told them what I had in mind. My plan to marry my wife was just so I could save her from being married off to a rich old man. Before going to meet her parents, I had to ask my wife if she liked the idea I had. She got angry and said I was trying to take advantage of the situation. I tried to make her understand where I was coming from, but she shut me up and left. We did not see each other for weeks after that. I heard from a friend of mine that the man my wife's parents wanted to marry came to visit them for a proper introduction. According to my friend, who was an eyewitness, the man was old enough to be her father. 1 month after that day, I was preparing to resume my first year in the university. I just had 2 weeks before I traveled to school. One day, my wife visited my house and asked to see me. She was finally ready to get married to me. I don't want this story to get too long, so I'll fast forward to when I went to tell her parents about my intentions to marry their daughter. They did not agree at first because I was not a rich man, but when I told them I was going to the university, they agreed on the condition that I take my wife with me. We got married 1 week before I left for school. My wife joined me 1 month later in school, and we lived together in my small apartment. She took side jobs, and I studied and worked at a wood shop. 4 years later, I graduated from college. I saved enough money for us to move to an apartment with 2 rooms and start a family. During my years of school, my wife and I agreed not to have children because we were not settled enough yet. As time went on, I started looking for a sustainable job since the side jobs were not paying me enough. After months of searching, I got a job as a secretary. My wife worked as a nanny for a school and earned some money. 2 years later, we decided to start a family. My wife got pregnant and gave birth to a baby boy. Our son is named Joseph. I worked harder since the birth of our son because I wanted to provide him with the things my wife and I did not have growing up. My marriage with my wife started off as a marriage of convenience, but we respected each other and tried our best to live in harmony. 4 years later, my wife gave birth to another baby boy. We named him Zion. I had 2 children to feed, so I tried my best to work harder each day. We moved from our apartment into a bungalow house. It was a big deal for me because I was the only one in my family who achieved that. I know you all are wondering how all the problems began. Well, stay with me because my experience is about to get really interesting. My wife has always been a woman who cares a lot about her looks, position in society, and wealth. Even when we were kids, she would tell me all about her big dreams. I have big dreams too, but I like to dream realistically. I like to work as hard as I can, then see where that takes me. Even after moving into the bungalow, my wife still felt like I was not doing enough. She compared our house to that of her friends and relatives. She told me how her clothes were no longer in style and how her hair was not good enough. I gave her enough money to take care of herself monthly, but she never appreciated it. She wanted to buy expensive bags and dresses. She would tell me how a rich man built a new mansion in town and how he bought a car for his wife. These were things I could not afford, but that didn't mean I was poor. We eat 3 square meals daily, and I paid for my children's school fees. We had extra money to go out once in a while and even celebrate the holidays. I tried to make my wife understand that I was trying my best to provide for us, but all of it fell in deaf ears. My wife even quit her job as a nanny because she felt like it was demeaning and embarrassing. I did not complain, and I kept providing for all of us, yet nothing seemed to make her happy. Nothing I did was enough for the standards she wanted. She always found something negative to say about everything I did. People have read it. I need your opinion here. How does a woman who quits her job because it's too demeaning expect her husband to build a mansion overnight? I tried my best to see things from her point of view, but none of it made sense. My wife had me working extra hours and taking side jobs just because of her rants. She did not force me into doing any of these things. But we all know how men behave. No man wants his wife to compare him with someone else. I have a very big ego, and it's something I am very proud of. All the extra work and effort I was putting in was constantly going in vain. I'm a human being, which meant as that went on, I got very tired of my wife's unnecessary nagging. I stopped trying and just kept working. I did not see the need to sweat unnecessarily, just to buy overly expensive bags for a woman that kept comparing me to as many men as possible. Maybe my wife thought I was stupid back then. I still don't know. I owned a house and we were eating every single day without any problems. I did not want her to get ideas into my head and make me greedy. All I could do was work hard. This went on for months and then years. The only time it got to me was when my wife decided to take matters into her own hands and let freedom take over her common sense. I know some of you might ask, how could it possibly get any worse? Well, it did. She did the worst thing any married wife could do to her husband. My wife cheated on me. I didn't know she was cheating on me at first. I was so busy with work that I did not notice anything strange. Yes, you read that right. I did not notice anything strange at all. My wife did not work at all. She usually stayed home and cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My wife would find time for her social life in between those activities. My children were old enough to go to school and get back by themselves, so there was no need to go pick them up. I went to work quite early in the morning and got back late at night. My sex life with my wife was extremely scheduled. We had days where we did not have sex at all, and then there were days when we wanted to. I did not see a change in my wife. I know most times you'd know if your partner is cheating on you, but I had no idea because I was barely home. No one should blame me for not being home. It is not my fault that I worked my ass off to provide for my family. Even after more than 12 hours at work, my wife still accused me of not working enough. It's not always the man's fault that he cannot be at home. Sometimes women play a huge role in it. My wife was still the same greedy woman she turned into. Anytime I got back from work, I still heard the same comparison stories. But Reddit, what made me suspicious was my wife's closet. I know how weird that is. My wife's closet made me suspicious. Well, my wife was changing bags and clothes almost every day. I became suspicious after months because you knew I was not the one buying those things. She did not work or have a source of income. Her family couldn't send her money because I was practically the one sending the money. She had no other relatives that I knew of, and even if she did, I could swear in my life that none of them had the money to spend on bags and shoes. Before I continue, let me make something clear. I have never shamed my wife for being unemployed. Not once in our marriage did I tell her she needed to get a job. I never felt the need to do that. In fact, I did not even sex anything wrong with it. I understood my role as the husband was to care and provide for my family, and I did just that. So when I noticed how my wife was suddenly affording luxury items, I knew I had to question it. In our marriage, I've always let her do whatever she wanted to do. I never restricted her or planned her schedule for her. She was free to do whatever she had an interest in doing. We were practically childhood friends. I went to school with this girl. I saw her grow up and she saw me grow up. That had to count for something. Even her luxurious lifestyle did not make me suspect she was cheating. Yes, you read that right. I never thought it was related to cheating. I trusted her that much. I mean, I have made sacrifices for that woman. I married her when I did not even plan on getting married yet. I took her with me to school and shouldered her responsibility. I did all those things for a woman I called my friend and now my wife. I never thought I would ever demand loyalty from her. I thought she had the common sense to know what loyalty meant. To be honest, now that I think about it, I feel that I made the mistake of trusting her so much. I thought too highly of her, and that is how I messed up. Never, I repeat, never trust someone so blindly and expect loyalty from them just because you think they would remember all that you did for them. I made this mistake, and I swear the circumstances hit me in the face very hard. One day, I decided to confront my wife. I had observed her for months and planned to ask her what was going on. One way to know when someone is doing what they are not supposed to do is when they get very defensive. I have realized that defense is a fork of shield for most people who are in the wrong. Immediately, I spoke to my wife about it. She got very defensive. She swore on her life that she was not doing anything wrong. I did not even accuse her of anything, lol. All I asked was where she was getting the money from. That was literally all, and then she decided to overeat. I was surprised because I did not expect that kind of reaction from her. I did not think she'd get so defensive. I remember trying to calm her down and explain to her that all I wanted to do was ask where she got all the money she was using to fund her lifestyle. My wife broke into tears when I persisted. I feel like laughing now that I think of what happened that day. It was so funny. It's funnier now that I know I almost caught the deer. Her crocodile tears looked so real, I almost believed I did something wrong. But of course, I did not back down. Her tears did not affect me because I knew she had no reason to cry unless she was guilty. When I realized that she had no plans of telling me the truth, I let her be. When I say I let her be, I don't mean that I forgot all about the incident. Of course I didn't. My wife was buying different shoes, bags, and dresses every weekend. Not just that, I got to know from her children that she was hardly home. I knew she attended her women's meetings and clubs, but none of it ever got to the point that my children had to tell me they barely saw their mother. I made my wife believe that I forgot all about the incident and just saw that she would get comfortable and go back to her normal lifestyle. One thing about me is that I'm a very disciplined man. I was raised to be that way. There's never a day in my life where I sit down and blame other people for my own shortcomings. If there was anything I lacked, I worked hard to get it. I never played the blame game because I know only lazy people. I decided to keep an eye on my wife to see what she had been up to. It was very difficult because, like I mentioned earlier, I came home very late at night. I did not have the time to keep track of her events. It did not help that my wife stayed home all through the weekend. She was very smart with her activities. She knew I stayed home during the weekends, so she behaved. It took months for me to really get an idea of what my wife had been up to. It took that long because I barely had any time for myself. My work took up all the time I had. I would leave work during lunch breaks and go to the facilities she usually visited for meetings. I'm not a stalker, Reddit. I was just a husband who wanted to know why his wife was being so secretive and extravagant. I needed to know why my children hardly saw their mother. I had to stalk her if that was going to give me my answers. Each time I went to the buildings and facilities she usually worked in, I did not find her there. I could not come every day because I did not want them to be suspicious, but whenever I went there, she was nowhere to be found. I was practically going in circles at that point, so I decided to re-strategize and do it right. I made the big step of taking a whole day off work. Reddit, for me, was a very huge step. A day off work was going to be deducted off my salary, but I had no problem with it. I was ready to make that sacrifice as long as I found out what my wife had been up to. Let me tell you this, people on Reddit, a day off work was not enough at all. On the first day, I got lost while trying to follow her around. I did not have a car, so it was hard to keep up. Most importantly, I did not want to be seen at all. Not just by my wife, but by people on the streets. It will raise eyebrows if they find a man trailing after a woman for a long time. After days of trying, I finally got to know what my wife's pattern was like. She would take many short stops before she finally made it to her destination. The house I saw her entering was very huge. It was a mansion with large gates and thick security. I don't even know how she was able to get past the two hefty men that stood in front of the gates with frowns on their faces. My wife seemed familiar with them, though. They would smile at her and give her space to enter. When I got back home after the second day of following her there, I was very suspicious. I did not like the feeling I had when I saw her getting into those gates with a smile on her face. I didn't even remember the last time I saw my own wife smiling. I'm at home. I wanted to confront her that very day, but I knew none if it would lead me to the real truth. Yes, Reddit, I know I am a fool. I should have walked up to her that very moment and demanded answers, but I chose not to. I decided to patiently wait till I got enough evidence. 1 week after that, I threw myself into work because I had a lot to do. The day offs I took left me with a lot of workload. I even forgot all about finding my wife going into a mansion. I had to cover up for all the lost time because I did not have time to think about my wife's activities. Once in a while I'd think about it, but I brushed it off my mind as fast as it came. I had friends, but I did not tell any of them about what was going on in my house. I would look weak if I decided to take my matrimonial troubles to people outside my house. I was everything but weak. I was a man who had to save his marriage and his home. One day I was sitting at home after a long day of work. I just had dinner and was about to drift off to sleep when my wife told me she had to speak to me. I asked her what it was about, and she said she was tired of living such a poor life. That night I was very surprised. I could not understand why she started ranting unprovoked. She talked about how her friends were living better than her and how she was doing only one living a stagnant life. That was a woman who was almost married off to Ammon, old enough to give birth to her. If she married him, she'd probably be one of his many wives. How could she have described her life then? Those men had money, but they wasted it on getting new wives daily. She wouldn't even get the kind of freedom I was giving you in our marriage. My wife went as far as accusing me of making her uneducated. She said I refused to take her to college. She accused me of killing all her dreams. That night, I could not even believe my ears. I took up the responsibility of feeding her while I was a student at college. I could hardly afford to send myself to school. How did she expect me to fund her to college? Even before getting married to her, I made it clear that I was still struggling myself and that our life was not going to be rosy. So how did the tables turn and suddenly make me the culprit? None of it made sense to me. I got very upset and finally confronted her about the mansion I saw her at. My wife was shocked to know that I found her there. In order to get the truth, I pretended like I knew what she was up to. I told her I was very disappointed in her and what she did. She did not speak for a long time. People have read it. I took that as an opportunity. I kept on telling her how I was going to call her parents and tell them what I saw. That was when she finally admitted to have cheated on me. She said it without any form of guilt. I still remember her words, "Yes, I'm cheating on you. I found a man that could meet up with my needs. So what?" I was so shocked I lost my footing and sat on the bed. I felt betrayed and used. I don't know what was worse, my wife cheating on me or the fact that she was not guilty. I got angry. Very angry. The woman I provided for was cheating on me. I ordered her to park her things and leave the house that very night. Do you know the shocking part? My wife did not even try to apologize or beg. She arranged her things and left the house that very night. She left with no regard for her children. She didn't even say goodbye to them. I was so disappointed that night that I pinched the wall and ended up with a bleeding fist. My wife did not come back the next day. I expected her to at least come see how the kids were doing, but she didn't. When I asked her to leave the house, I would have changed my mind if I saw remorse in her eyes. But there was none. I hated her from that very moment because I found her ungrateful and despicable. She ruined the home I worked hard to build for my children. I wanted to give my children everything I didn't have, but she took one thing I had in my childhood from their childhood. I had a family, 2 parents that loved each other in their own way. I did not grow up in a broken up. I was poor, but I had my parents. Weeks flew by and my wife was still nowhere to be found. My children asked questions, but I told them their mother went on a trip and was going to be back after some time. I hated myself for doing that, but I had no choice. 8 months after that, I had to lie to my children and assure them they'd see their mommy. I was depressed and confused. I did not know what to do. I still had to work. I did not have time for myself. I had to drop my kids off at my sister's place in another state. I have her money for their upkeep and education. I had to do that because I knew my children needed a female's care and proper upbringing. My work gave me no time for that. 3 months after dropping my kids at my sister's place, a friend of mine told me there was a government worker who had been caught embezzling the government's money. All his assets were frozen and his businesses were shut down. He practically went broke overnight. My friend told me he had been embezzling government funds for years out of greed. When my friend told me that story, I did not know it had anything to do with me until my wife showed up at the house 2 months later with her belongings. I was so angry to see her that I practically threw her out. She went on her knees and asked me to forgive her. People have read it. Imagine your wife who left you and your children for a year and a half coming back to your house and asking you to take her in. I felt like laughing at how comical the situation was. I told her she was crazy and stupid if she thought I'd take her back. I laughed in her face and sent her back to wherever she was coming from. She begged me and asked to see her children. I asked her where she had been all those months and why she suddenly realized she had children. I had to control my anger that day or else things would have escalated. It took the intervention of the neighbors, if not I, almost pushed her out of my house. I told her our marriage was over, and I never wanted to see her again. I told her I lived without her for a year and a half, and I could live without her forever. I didn't even want my children to see her ever again. I knew that the best way to ruin her life was to make her a divorcee. 2 weeks after that day, I filed for divorce. I gave the papers to her friend who knew of her whereabouts after signing them. I did not bother giving it to her myself. That was 5 months ago. My wife did not want to sign the papers for weeks until I threatened to take the case to court. I was bluffing. I did not have money for a lawyer. The court gave me some custody of our children since I'm the one with enough money to take care of them. She is allowed to see them, but cannot take them home. Her parents called and begged me on the phone, but I did not change my mind. I could not forgive a woman that threw out all the years we spent together, the home we built, and the sacrifices we made for each other. I saved her once, but I was not ready to save her again. She was not worth my time or sympathy, and I tried to make her parents understand that. Even my parents commended me for letting her go. That's a big deal because my parents are not fans of divorce, but they were ready to see things from my point of view. Oh, before I forget. Of Reddit, I also discovered that the government worker who had been caught was the man my wife cheated on me with. Yes, she left me for a richer man who stole from the government to build his wealth. She thought the grass was greener somewhere else and decided to cheat on me for money. She got her karma, and her affair partner got bankrupt. He used the little money he had left to get a lawyer because he got sued. He could not afford to spend on her and provide for her anymore, so she ran back to me, her backup plan. It made me angry that the only reason my wife truly came back was because her partner no longer had enough money to fund the lifestyle she wanted. A part of me thought she came back because she wanted us to work again. I was very wrong. I might not be rich, but at least I make an honest living that can sustain me and my children. Nothing really changed for me and I got back to work, but my children are still trying to wrap their heads around the new development. They struggled to understand why their mother was no longer living in our house. That really made me guilty. But I could not let my guilt ruin my life again. I lost all trust for my wife and to me. Our marriage never happened. That woman ruined our marriage, and I paid her back by making her homeless and divorcing her. I do not regret a thing. I know I am not the only one with a story like this. I'm grateful to have moved past it. Thank you all for reading this crazy life experience of mine. I hope I've been able to show some people that they're not alone. Thank you, Reddit. Comments. Reddit user. I cannot believe that a woman you sacrificed so much for would stoop that low and do that to you. I am a woman myself, but I am not afraid to say that sometimes women take it too far. You worked hard and struggled to create a better life for you and your family. She did nothing but lazy around all day, yet she had the audacity to cheat on you. I feel like some women do not even deserve the love they get from their husbands. If my husband saved me from getting married to an old man, I'd probably serve him forever. Reddit user. I thought stuff like this only happened in movies, but I guess I was wrong. This has to be the most despicable thing I've ever read. I'm glad you were able to get custody of your children. I hope you heal from this experience and continue making a better life for yourself and your children. There's nothing worse than marrying the wrong person. I wish you all the best. Reddit user 3us. I'm usually not one to comment on posts, but this one had me laughing and crying at the same time. At first, I tried seeing things from the woman's point of view, but I changed my mind. Your children deserved better. I'm happy you did not take her back. That could have made you a very big fool. People like her do not change. The only reason she came back was because things got sour in her partner's life. People like her only want you when you have something to offer. Shameful.